Okay, welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com, and additional articles and videos can also be found at our TV website at IndianCountryTV.com. Here is the news for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Oregon officials say they found a burned body in a pickup that touched off a wildfire last week on the Umatilla Reservation in Oregon. Deborah Croswell, Tribal Deputy Executive Director, told the East Oregonian that it may be a few days before investigators can determine whether foul play was involved in the incident. The name of the victim was not immediately released. The body was found June 4th when firefighters went to a fire southeast of Pendleton, Oregon. Croswell says the 2008 Chevrolet pickup truck burned and ignited the fire. The truck apparently got stuck in steep terrain, but police have not determined why. The vehicle was at the location about a half-mile off the regular road bed. Members of the Northern Arapaho tribe held a memorial walk June 6 to mark the one-year anniversary of the deaths of 3 girls whose bodies were found in a tribal housing complex. Ohitika Winds Alexis Gardner, 13, Winter Rose Thomas, 14, and Alexandria or Alex Whiteplume, 15, were found June 4th, 2008 at the Beaver Creek Housing Development, a tribal housing complex south of Riverton, Wyoming. Authorities have yet to release any information about the case, including how the girls died. The FBI has been handling the investigation because the girls were on the reservation. To date, neither the FBI, federal court officials, nor the local coroner have released any details about the case. The Wyoming Coalition for Open Government in March submitted an opens records law request to Fremont County Coroner Ed McGoslin for the girls' autopsy reports. McGoslin denied the group's request, saying it's a federal case and the FBI case remains active. 5 Amazon tribes are closer to extinction than any of the scores of other indigenous groups living in voluntary isolation worldwide, an Indian rights group said during late May. While loggers, ranchers, and oil companies have encroached on their lands in the jungles of Peru, Brazil, and Paraguay, those countries' governments have failed to protect them, allowing outsiders to destroy their forests and expose them to unfamiliar diseases, the London-based Survival International said in a recent report. Many tribal members are now fleeing illegal loggers in Peru for Brazil's vaster jungles, said Jose Carlos Morales, a Brazilian government researcher in the Brazilian Amazon. Brazil's government last year released photos of a dozen isolated Indians firing arrows at an airplane outside grass-thatched huts near Brazil's Peruvian border. But top Peruvian officials have said there is little proof of any such tribe's existence, with President Alan Garcia suggesting in a 2007 newspaper column that they may have been invented by environmentalists opposed to Amazon oil drilling. Peru has opened up 75% of its Amazon territory for oil exploration, including on lands legally titled to the Indians of Peru. Paris-based oil company Perenco SA plans to invest $1 billion by 2012 to drill in the remote jungle near Peru's border with Ecuador, a region inhabited by several isolated tribes. Thousands of Amazon Indians in Peru have blocked an oil pipeline and stalled transport across 6 jungle provinces for more than a month to protest oil activity and to demand the repeal of laws they say open their lands to further development. The military in Peru recently moved against those blockades, killing over 2 dozen indigenous protesters at those roadblocks. A group of Mohawk blockaded the Skyway Bridge in eastern Ontario recently between Bellevue and Kingston. That began on Sunday, June 7th. They were protesting the federal government's failure to resolve the issue of firearms on the Akwesasne's Territories border crossing in eastern New York. In response, the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne issued a statement yesterday saying it never was, nor is it, our people's desire to act in a manner that would negatively impact our efforts to seek a diplomatic resolution. Akwesasne Island, where the port of entry is, links Cornwall, Ontario, and Massena, New York, across the St. Lawrence River. Ron Moran, Customs and Immigration Union president, had met with border official President Stephen Rigby last week and said Rigby is considering the option of moving the entire port further north off the reservation and onto Cornwall's shores as a possible solution. Final options would be up to the federal government in Ottawa, according to Rigby. Public Safety Minister Peter Van Loan still has not met with the Mohawk consul at Akwesasne to discuss the banning of the arming of custom officers at the port. In Ottawa, Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff criticized Van Loan for not having a meeting with the Mohawk consul as of yet. Van Loan said arming of every port across the border was a promise made by the Conservative Party in the 2006 election campaign, and he says they should be keeping that promise. Alcohol sales at a North Carolina mountain casino have been approved by members of the Cherokee tribe as a way to boost profits used to run tribal government and pay its members. The Eastern Band of Cherokee approved alcohol sales in a 1,847 to 1,301 vote last week after nearly half of the tribe's registered voters went to the polls. The vote was only about alcohol sales at the casino specifically. Supporters of alcohol sales said it would boost profits at the tribe's casino. The tribe uses half the profits from the 11-year-old casino to run its government and the other half for a twice-a-year payment to tribal members. The first of this year's payments to the tribe's members were sent out Monday and were down 12%. This year's checks were for $3,892. Last year they were for $4,473 for each individual. In January, the casino had its first layoff since it opened. About 100 jobs were cut as the sagging economy reduced visitors by around 15%. Work has started on a new temporary casino for the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation at Manson, Washington, on the north shore of Lake Chelan. The Wenatchee World reports that the $7.4 million structure will have room for 500 slots, up from the 380 now available. There also will be table games, a restaurant, a nightclub, and a sports bar. The building will be nearly twice as large as the existing Mill Bay Casino now in operation. Workers began clearing ground last week for the temporary steel structure, which will be used while the Colville tribe searches for a permanent site. Tribal Gaming Director Randy Williams says the new casino will employ about 200 people, nearly 50 more than are presently employed by the current operation. Horse riders and horses and riders and everybody have left Fort Robinson State Park on their way to Pine Ridge as part of the 12th annual Crazy Horse Ride. Organizer Bam Brewer told KQSK Radio in Chadron, Nebraska, that he was expecting 220 to 250 people to make the ride at least part of the way, if not during the entire trip. Those numbers really depend on the weather, he said, which was dry Monday morning as the ride began. The ride honors veterans and the legendary Sioux warrior Crazy Horse. Riders camped in Chadron Monday night and then headed for the Beaver Valley area north of Hayes Springs Tuesday, June 9th. Connie Tenfingers of the Oglala Sioux tribe said that the ride is scheduled to end June 11th in downtown Pine Ridge on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank our underwriters for helping us with this broadcast and you for joining with us again and again. Miigwech!